This is actually my first talk that I give as part of Google, and I wanted to cover one of the items that I am most passionate about and that made me actually joy, is when I saw that Google was addressing that problem, it made me excited about becoming part of Google. But before I go there, I wanted to, the title of the talk is How to Resurrect Innovation in the Enterprise. And this is the outline of the talk. I want to give you a minute to read the outline. So this is roughly how the talk is going to go. Kubernetes, Kubernetes, Kubernetes. But before I jump into that, I'm a big believer that innovation stems out of identifying the problem, identifying a true problem, and solving that problem. Many entrepreneurs and many innovators fall in the trap of innovating the solution to a problem that nobody cares about. And there is a problem that we have been seeing over the last 15, if not 50 years. In the consumer industry, over the last 10 years, innovation has been the strongest it has ever been, right? So we have mobile apps about 1 order, 2 order, even 3 orders of magnitude more than we ever have or ever had with Windows and Linux, like traditional OSs. But if you look at innovation within the enterprise and the level of change and innovation in the enterprise, it's a fraction of that. There is so much resistance. In my experience with Cloudera, over the last 11 years before joining Google, I saw how slow and how tedious it is to do any change for the application infrastructure within enterprises. So to answer that question, I want you to participate in giving me some reasons why. Just raise your hand, I repeat the reason, you don't have to have the mic to save some time and just say what you said. Why did we get so much innovation over the last 10 years with mobile apps? Why are they moving at this rapid speed, way faster than anything else? I want to hear some reasons why I think that is the case. Just shout it out. I hear portability. Affordability, meaning the cost of building something new has become much cheaper. Consumers devamping, that's a very good point. There's huge demand out there, so then the supply now became even bigger because of that, because the mobile addressable market is way bigger than the laptop addressable market. But competition? What do you mean by that? There's more people able to compete, so there's more innovation coming out of that. Yeah, that's a good point. No legacy software to support. You can start from abstract. That's actually a very good point. That's very true. Another good answer here. You forgot, that's okay. Low barrier to entry, meaning you can enter the market easily and create an app that becomes successful. I want to hear an answer from this side. I don't want to ignore this side. Any other answers why we think there's so much innovation happening in the mobile space? More money? Peer pressure, that goes back to competition. More money goes back to the demand is very high. That's the answer I was looking for. It's one of them. There's no question that you guys described many of the byproduct results of this movement taking place. But if you truly look at why did this happen at this scale, it comes down to 2 things, iOS and Android. iOS and Android gave us these standardized platforms in which you can build once and deploy anywhere and address anybody. And not only that, it takes care of updating your app in a very high-paced way so that you can innovate much quicker than ever before. It also takes care of the security of being able to scan the apps and make sure it's safe to install. I'm still very scared of deploying a new software on my laptop, but on the app marketplace, we deploy anything because we trust that the marketplace security is enabled. And the marketplace itself, meaning that there is the App Store, whether that be on iOS or Android, that makes your app accessible to everybody. That's really what happened within the within the consumer space that allowed us to have that explosion. Now, if you look within the enterprise, we have all the symptoms of the problems that prevents us from doing that. So we have all of these different stacks, so we can't just build once, deploy anywhere. We don't have good methodologies around how we enforce stability and reliability. Can I ask for some water, please? Sorry. It takes forever to deploy something new or to update it. The talent needs to learn multiple frameworks before they can do anything. So those are some symptoms of that problem. But the essence of it is there's no standard. There is no standard that solves the common problems that we have in terms of how we build things and that allowed us to deploy them anywhere at high speed with auto updates, with security, et cetera, et cetera. That's really the essence of why we don't, like, I don't know how many of you work for an enterprise or have worked for an enterprise for a long time. Innovation is dead in the enterprise. It's really dead. Like new apps, or not by apps, I don't mean mobile apps, I mean applications within the enterprise. They take years to get to the markets. And when they get to the market, it takes a year before they get updated again to the next release or the next version. And that's the problem that we need to solve. Otherwise, we as a civilization just can't advance, in my opinion. Thank you very much. Sparkling, thanks. Thanks for giving me a choice. That's a full-service VC right here. He's adding so much value already. No, I meant that in a good way. I meant it in a good way. The problem is hard to solve in the enterprise compared to the consumer space because in the enterprise you have multiple masters. Show of hands, how many of you is building software or hardware, like the mega chip that you just showed us today, that is being deployed in the enterprise or sold in the enterprise? Show of hands if you are selling to the enterprise or you work for the enterprise. So about 30% of the room is raising their hand, if I'm counting correctly. The problem in the enterprise is this, is you have multiple masters that you need to appeal to. You need to appeal to the platform engineering architects that are going to deploy that platform across the enterprise. You need to appeal, and they have their own list of problems. Some of them are listed here. You have to appeal to the developers, which will be building the actual logic, the business logic that enables that application. You have to appeal to the service operators that are responsible for keeping it up and running reliably without downtime. And you have to appeal to the security guys who are trying to block anything from happening for good reason because they're afraid of security violations taking place. And that's what makes this problem so hard to solve. Now, I'll go back to the beginning of this whole conversation. What excited me about joining Google was this. Google has done this inside of their own organization. So there is no question that Google has been one of the most innovative consumer companies that we have ever heard of. They have multiple products now that achieved billion users plus in terms of status, whether that be Google Photos, Google Maps, of course search, Google Mail, Calendar, et cetera, et cetera. And we see the rapid innovation and rate of change that all of these products are going through. So they have decided to take the learnings that enable them to do that, which is this sentence that I'm going to read to you in a second, and encapsulate that in a platform that everybody in the world can consume, with the mission of enabling every enterprise to experience the rapid digital transformation that they can achieve leveraging data innovation. So the solution is this. It's simpler said than done, of course. It's much harder to do this. But the future of applications and infrastructure that they run on is created with containerized microservices. So microservices is a very key part of this approach, managed through a declarative system with a single control experience that uses a service mesh to span all application locations. And I'm sorry it sounds very complex, but that's exactly the answer. For those of you familiar with the space, that's exactly what we need. We need something that allows us to break out our architectures into a microservices kind of approach, mix and match these services as we need to build something new, reduce the scope of each service so we can innovate on it much quicker, have a service mesh that connects all of these services together, but monitors the traffic across each service so you can reduce the blast radius of a security attack and very quickly stop it from taking place, monitor the communication between all of these services so you can improve the reliability of them, and then be able to do that anywhere. So that's the very technical phrasing of it. This is the architecture slide. This is the architecture slide from the marketing team that says the exact same things, but in a marketing picture, right? Anthos, in the middle, formulates a set of managed operations and service management principles coupled with a marketplace for developers to deploy apps, whether that be internal developers or external developers, across any location, whether that be Google's cloud or on-premise or other aspects like the edge. Now I have a couple of questions. I would like a show of hands for them. How many of you heard about Anthos before today? If you can raise your hand. Wow, that's a very small part of the audience, about 10%. I'm glad I'm speaking here today. Hopefully next time somebody asks this question, there's more hands that goes up. How many of you heard that Google has a software product that they sell that gets deployed on-premise inside of companies? Not a cloud service, but as on-premise software. Please raise your hand. It's even 5%. It's even smaller than the Anthos. So many people thought that Anthos was only a cloud thing. So no, I mean, the mission of Google right now is a lot more focused on meeting developers and meeting enterprises where they are, as opposed to where the cloud is. Because many enterprises have legacy, as one of you correctly identified here, that cannot be moved to the cloud yet. And we need to be able to still take advantage of this new way of doing things, even before we move to the cloud, which will make it easier to move to the cloud later on if we want to. So this is a deeper picture of the Anthos components. I'm not going to go in it in detail here, given that the audience is not familiar with Anthos itself yet. But the summary of this picture is the enablement of that phrase that I said earlier. How can we take our applications, whether that be legacy or modern, convert them into an architecture that has the same benefits of Android? In other words, Anthos is the Android of the enterprise space. That's a layman's version definition. Somebody asks you, what's Anthos? You can just say, it's the equivalent of Android for the enterprise. It allows us to have a standard stack that we can innovate and develop on. We can deploy anywhere at very high speed, getting all the benefits that we see in the consumer space and the enterprise instead. A very key function to enable that, like that would not be successful. Again, many of you actually identified this. The power of Android and iOS was the reach. Is that now when I publish my application in that marketplace, when one of you starts a startup and creates an app that goes in that marketplace, everybody can access it now with simple billing, simple deployment, and within the consumer space. Anthos is doing the same thing in the enterprise. So if you create a startup that solves, for example, solves how we do credit risk scoring, or solves how we do anti-money laundering in a much more creative way, you can publish it as an app within the marketplace, and all enterprises across the world, they can now deploy that with confidence that the security has been already pre-checked. I don't have to go and do that. I don't have to go back and sign another contract with my procurement department, which, by the way, any of you selling an enterprise know that takes like a year by itself to get them to approve this new thing. No, it's just part of a standard process with a standard billing, standard contract, just like we have in our mobile apps. Deploy, up, running, done. That's what's going to enable innovation. This whole story all linked together. Now, I'm going to get a little bit more technical in the next two slides, so I might lose 2/3 of the audience, but I think that's okay. I'll still try to explain it a bit to everybody in the room, but we're very limited on time. I only have 1 minute left. So very quickly, another very key component of making this work is the serverless movement, which you can see down here by this green bar on the bottom, is what we call the serverless zone. The old way of doing things is on the left. It's on-premises, where every server is a dedicated bare metal service, and we, as an organization, we as an enterprise, we have to take care of everything. Even though our business logic is that the application and the functions way at the top, we still have to take care of everything. It's not our skill set, it's not our experience, it's not our strong area, and it's not really advancing our business. It's like airline companies building the airplane and flying the airplane. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's how we used to do things. Now, as you can see, with cloud, we are moving very quickly towards this direction. So most of the cloud systems, Google and the others that should not be named right now in this room, they now moved very quickly towards what's called cloud functions. Cloud functions is a new approach where you only care about this part. You as a developer, as an organization, you build your business logic. You build the functions that make up your microservices. And everything else is managed for you. You don't have to worry about it. And all the things that we expect are done for us. We don't have to worry about them. I don't have to go and rethink how am I going to do security, how I'm going to reduce the blast radius of a hacking attack, how I'm going to have service A, service B talk to each other in a scalable way and scale up and scale down as demand goes up or goes down. we're doing the same thing. We're reinventing the wheel over and over again. So can I have something that does this all for me so I can just focus on this? So this also, so in addition to the concept of Anthos, having a platform like Android, coupled with having a new way of thinking where we are building the logic and everything else is managed, everything else that is non-disputable, that we know we have to do is managed for us, so we can focus on the things that are the differences. That is what is required to enable innovation. Does it make sense? So Google's approach to this, we have what's called Cloud Run. Cloud Run is more on this side, application up, but we also have Cloud Functions, which is more on the functional side. But that said, the other big cloud vendors that should not be named, they have equivalent approaches as well. So my talk is, we need this. We are all doing it. I'm biased to work for Google. I think Google has the best answer for it. But this is the future. This is where we need to go. For us to unlock and enable innovation in the enterprise, we really need to get to this point. Now, the marketing team asked me to show the slide. I apologize, but we had to show a slide. I told them we need something that shows our audience that this is happening. And they gave me a slide from an unnamed customer. So at the bottom there says, Director of Enterprise DevOps at some random financial services industry. So I was like, but anyway, that's because we're early in the cycle, so we can't really mention who. But this is the key slide. They moved from an innovation cycle where they have been only deploying new updates and changes to their apps once a quarter to once a month, and they're very quickly now on the path to send out new updates every week. That's a 13x improvement in the rate of innovation within that organization. And that's exactly the kind of thing we see with our mobile apps, right? Where we are updating our mobile apps every day with new changes. We want to get to that same point within the enterprise. Now I have one last slide to share with you, which is the secret, the real secret for why I joined Google to work on Anthos. I am from Egypt. Anthos is 3 pyramids inside of each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
It's awesome. Maybe zooming out just for a minute. So Google Cloud, so Google GCP has huge ambitions, right? Like there's all this energy. You know, Thomas Kurian joined like a year ago or something. You've been there 3 months.
Yes.
Obviously, the very clear objective is to take over AWS and
Actually,
Azure.
the very clear objective is to make a lot of money.
Yes. which you know the Google
by serving
world
our customers in the right way, just to sound more like
right.
And
I guess how are you guys going to get there? What's sort of like the menu of options? So Anthos is a part of the strategy. What else are the key initiatives?
Yes. So I personally think, and not me, many of the analysts like Gartner, Forrester, and many others, that the product maturity of what Google has, especially when it comes to data warehousing or this kind of stuff, application modernization, or machine learning and AI, is actually far above. And you can see all of the waves and the quadrants that they produce. Google is always upper right corner, way ahead of Amazon, way ahead of Microsoft. Okay, I mentioned them. I shouldn't mention. I was told you should mention your competitors. So, which means that the Google Cloud mission is not about creating new technology. We have the best technology, but from a business maturity point of view, we haven't been there yet in terms of how we operate as a business. Now, Google very recently, actually I think last week for the first time, split out how much they make from cloud. And the cloud revenue run rate right now is $10 billion. $10 billion for a business that didn't exist like 5-6 years ago. So the catch-up mode is happening, but still, the other guys that I should not mention their names, they make that much money in a quarter, right? So Google makes it in a year, they make it in a quarter. So
Amazon does.
Say again?
Amazon does.
No, and Azure claims they do as well.
Is that right?
Yeah. If
it's
you lump everything
not disclosed, but they.
Yeah, okay. If you lump everything in,
right.
They claim. But they cheat a little bit. They do, and how they break out the numbers. They include things that might not. But it's actually hard. It's hard. To be honest, it's hard. It's hard, right? So it's hard. It's apples and oranges.
How do you feel
sometimes.
about them?
No, I love them. I mean, I use a Microsoft laptop. I'm a gamer, so I love Xbox. Like many things that they do, I love Amazon, but at the same time, I'm competing with them, so I'm a lot more loyal to Google. So, but to answer your question, it's all about the business execution. It's all about the business execution right now. Google has the right vision, it has the right technology. Again, that's not our word, that's the analysts as well confirming that. And for now, for us, it's all about executing on that. And I think if we continue to do that well, the goal is to be one of the leaders in the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess one of the key things, I mean, you're head of developer relations, so I guess I will speak to you it'll be very close to your heart. But so one of the key things that GCP seems to be doing is to play nice with open source.
Yes.
And there's Confluent made some announcement recently with this Mongo and like a bunch of others.
Yeah.
Maybe give us a bit more color. Like, what does that mean exactly? If you're an open source vendor, why should you work with GCP in priority? And what's the actual sort of implementation of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, our view is to establish standards, and that's actually not just the Google view. Like, that's also my personal view. Is the power of open source is establishing standards. So, but it's not the only way of doing things. Like, again, if you go back to the analogy I gave with Android and iOS, Android is open source, iOS is closed source, iOS is very successful. Mm-hmm. And I think the same thing can happen in the enterprise as well. So you can have a closed source approach, which you might claim that the Microsoft Azure Arc approach, or again, I keep mentioning the names, or the AWS Outpost approach can also be successful in achieving this vision I laid out here. The difference is, I think when you're trying to win in the enterprise, history has shown that open source, when it comes to standardization at the platform side, wins. And the best historical example of that is Linux, obviously, right? So before Linux, we had HP UX, we had IBM AIX, we had Solaris, we had SunOS, and many, many others. And when Linux came in, it won over everything else, right? The others exist, but in small fractions compared to what Linux became. So we have that same belief as well. Like, we think to succeed in the enterprise on-premise, in the cloud, I don't think it makes a big difference, by the way, if it's open source or not, to be honest, because you're just using a cloud service, who cares? But on-premise, when you're using your own infrastructure to tie yourself to something, having it as open source makes a huge difference to enterprises.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, we're big fans of open source because of that.
Right.
Not because we love open source. We love open source, but that's not the reason. The reason is because we truly believe it's one of the best ways to establish standards within the enterprise.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, of course. And of course, seen from the perspective of a VC and startups, it's particularly appealing, right? Because it's been one of the big concerns in investing in open source is that big cloud vendors can just show up, take the open source code, and build their own version. Which,
yeah, and that's a double-edged sword because, like, we have that happening with Google as well. Like, Kubernetes clearly, which was built by Google, is the standard now for doing this. And yeah, all of these other cloud vendors that should not be named, whom I did name 100 times, they are adopting it as well. And that's so. But that's if you want to establish a standard, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to open up to people in a second because I want to give plenty of time for people to ask questions. But let's talk about Cloudera a little bit. So you built this incredible company. So you're a co-founder of it. You guys started in 2008. The company went public.
Still is public.
It still is public. Any thoughts about sort of where we are in that journey? So Cloudera was one of the key distributions of Hadoop. Where are we on that journey?
I mean, Cloudera still is the key distribution of Hadoop. So I should just very quickly say I was with Cloudera for 11.5 years since inception until the point when I left. When I left a few months ago, Cloudera's annual run rate in terms of revenue was about $700 million per year. That's not shabby. Many companies dream of achieving that goal and continues to grow at a healthy rate. And the market cap is around $3 billion. So overall, by all measures, Cloudera is a great success. I believe that Cloudera could be a lot bigger and a lot more successful, but the market has been penalizing Cloudera, rightfully so, for not capturing the cloud components sooner. And a couple of very good counterexamples to that is what MongoDB did. So MongoDB started betting on the cloud a lot sooner than Cloudera did, and hence they were able to share the revenue growth because it was sizable within the cloud. Cloudera is still at the point where we can't share that because it's still a smaller function compared to what we have on-premises. Our on-premises business, I shouldn't say their on-premises business, because I'm no longer there, has been growing in a very healthy way. But investors at large are worried that that's a mainframe business, right? That on-premise business is a mainframe. Now, I don't agree with that, because otherwise, why would Anthos be doing this? Why would VMware
it's somewhat ironic, right?
I actually don't agree with that, but that's the emotional state that investors are in right now. So it does create that, and that's why I get these massive other valuations with Mongo or with, who was the other speaker who had valuation go up by $2 billion, you said was here?
No, increased by $2 billion. Datadog.
Datadog, yeah.
Yes.
Spoke here and went up by $2 billion. Is that what I said?
Yes. So Cloudera. Probably Google.
So I'm hoping that will happen to Cloudera or Google. Either way, it's fine by me.
All right.
Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. I have a million questions, but I want to open up to people if there are questions. One over there.
There's one over there.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi.
Surprisingly, this microphone.
Can you comment on what is the equivalent of Anthos for other platforms that allows to run from one place on other clouds on premises?
Yes.
And isn't Google the first to come up with such solution?
It's a tricky question, because again, most time when you're speaking publicly on behalf of a company, they tell you don't mention our competitors in your talk, and that's why I kept saying
point.
We're way past that point. So yeah, a couple are the ones I did mention, right? So the other players, the other cloud, the two other big cloud vendors, they are both trying to do this as well, but they're coming more with proprietary ways of doing it versus open source. We believe the open source, Google strongly believes the open source way is the right way. There's many other companies doing it within their, so the cloud vendors are doing it across the entire stack, but there's other companies doing it just for their functionality. So for MongoDB, for example, and Cloudera, they're doing it to span multiple systems, right? Same thing. So, but only for the function of being a document database or the function of being a big data engine. So we see, and then legacy on-premise companies like VMware, they're also now trying to do this as well. Or Red Hat, same thing. So now I mentioned everybody. So we'll see if I still have my job tomorrow.
I can say you probably can't, but so Outpost was announced like a long time ago, like a year ago, and you guys just beat them to market effectively. Like you announced later but released before.
Yes,
and
that's the approach of Google. Google is strongly believe in prove your work. Like vaporware is not something. Like our engineers get hurt when you do that.
Yeah, great.
Like you have to say your words and prove them.
So I have a question about selling enterprise software, right? One of the biggest challenges isn't that you can't push it quickly enough, updates of products. It's your customers don't want it as quickly, right? Because they don't want to change their core systems.
Yes.
As
Why?
often. I guess it breaks things. Right?
Exactly, because they're afraid it will break things. And we were afraid we will break things on our laptops as well. Like I remember on my laptop, I wouldn't upgrade to the new version of anything when it comes out. And now we don't even think about it with our mobile apps. We just let the auto-update thing update everything for us whenever it comes in. And the reason why is because they were within the mobile space, within the continuous integration and continuous deployment architecture, we were able to build much more better test harnesses that push all the testing all the way more to the left when we're still building something before it gets deployed. And then when it actually gets deployed, we don't deploy to everybody everywhere at the same time. We do lots of A/B testing that allows us to catch all of these regressions much quicker than ever before. And that's the exact same mentality that we need to apply in the enterprise as well. Now, it will take time because enterprises will have to trust this, that this is working for them. But with consumers, we did turn around. And I think if you do it correctly within the enterprise, meaning if we come up with a continuous integration deployment process that is a lot more reliable in how we push out new things, then the enterprises will change that rule of, oh, I only want to do upgrade once a year. You're right. Like I know the system operators at Cloudera, we were releasing a new version every 3 months, and they would not deploy it until a year later, because they're afraid it will break stuff. And that will change. When we have this auto-update, self-managed, the serverless slide I showed, that will change. That mentality will change over time.
Talking about that and breaking things, one of the things that's different in consumer versus enterprise is the business process integrity, correct? Your two apps, mobile apps, don't need to work with each other, but taking Coupa and Salesforce, correct, or SAP, they all need to have a business process integrity.
Yes.
How do you ensure that? It's great from a technical perspective, it's great from a deployment perspective, but hey, the data is flowing, the processes, how do you ensure that?
Yes, so that's exactly one of the key innovations within the Anthos stack is the STO technology. And STO is about a service mesh that connects all of these microservices or services from other providers like Salesforce or whatever in a way that allows you to monitor any regressions happening in the communications between them. So you observe what's happening, but you can also configure what's happening dynamically as well. And the beauty of STO, the beauty of that service mesh is it's backward compatible. So even if you have legacy applications, it inserts a proxy that sits in the middle that the legacy application thinks is still connected one-to-one to this other service, but in reality it's not anymore. And it can be decoupled and observed to ensure and prevent these regressions that you referred to from taking place.
This sounds like a great idea, the product, when you're doing it. Are you able to, like, you guys just hired Chris Latner and you're doing, who's the father of Swift, and you're doing Swift with TensorFlow, and that seems to be a direction going forward in the future. And I'm using it with Xcode 11 and things like that. Are you going to have software tooling or as part of Anthos so that you could use the same Xcode with Swift with TensorFlow, Swift to do the coding of your modules? Because there's so many people that already understand how to code in iOS and using those tools, and it seems like it'd be transportable.
Now, very good question. Now, our observation as we have been working with our customers on Anthos and the Google Cloud Stack over the last number of years is enterprises are very married to the languages that they choose. So we are supporting about 10 languages, and we create client binaries and client libraries for all of them. I try to remember some of them right now. I don't know if I can remember all the 10. Can you remember 10 languages? Can you remember 10 languages, programming languages?
I cannot.
Okay, so now this is a test for me. Python, Node.js, Java, Go. These are kind of the very, very key languages at Google. But of course, C++, .NET, which is C#, Ruby, PHP, Perl still exists, is still in demand. And there's a bunch of up-and-coming new languages that we need to work on as well. So it's a big challenge for us. But we are deploying all the power and all the magic that we have in terms of machine learning that we use for translation of languages, human languages, to do that within the development space as well, to automate as much of that as we can.
Very good. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this with us.